Hi, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is part of Illuminate's Embracing the Unnormal webinar series. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dawn Herdman. I'm the President Director of Illuminate Asia. We are delighted to be partnering with Ivosights for today's webinar, which will outline Indonesian consumer sentiments about the new normal. Now, just a few items of housekeeping before we get started. First of all, I'd ask you to remain on mute and without a video for the duration of the webinar. This is so that there's no disruption to the presentations today. The presentations will take around 30 minutes approximately in total, and then we will have some time for a Q&A session. So if you have questions, please send them directly to myself in the Zoom chat. Okay. Please note that we will be sending a copy of the presentation and also the link to the presentation recording after the session. Okay. Let me start by introducing our speakers for today. Our first speaker will be Elga Yulwadian, the co-founder and CEO of Ivosights. Prior to starting Ivosights in 2017, Elga worked in various companies in marketing, digital marketing, and e-commerce roles. Elga is also a digital transformation advisor, as well as mentor for startup businesses, and for the S2, also for the S2 SVI Prasetya Mulia University. Our second speaker will be Iza Mohammed, Strategy Director at Illuminate Asia. Iza has more than 25 years experience in consumer insights, working across Asia Pacific. She's worked across many vertical industries, including 15 years consulting with clients in media. She is passionate about people and culture and believes in creative approaches in order to address and understand today's increasingly complex consumers. Okay, Harris, can you move to the next slide? And the next slide after this, yeah. Okay, so just as a way of introduction before I hand over to the first speaker, we understand that obviously the global pandemic, COVID-19, has really affected how people think and behave in their daily lives. Particularly at Illuminate Asia, we really wanted to understand how people are coping and adapting. We wanted to help our clients and their brands to make sense of this all. And hence why we actually launched this series of webinars. But now we see ourselves moving into a new stage, now that social restrictions are starting to ease and we're approaching this so-called new normal. So now we're really keen to understand how consumers are feeling about the transition back into a more normal life. It might be a slightly different life, but more normal than when the social restrictions was happening. So what we're going to present today, we have been partnering, as I mentioned, with Ivosights, and they will be taking you through, Pak Elga will take you through the first presentation, which will describe about their analysis and their social listening, using their social listening tools. And then our second speaker, Iza, will take you through Illuminate Asia's analysis, where we have dug out gone back to the raw data and dug out a bit more further depth on this insights around this new normal. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over the stage to Pak Elga to begin with the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I share my presentation. Thank you much for the time. We are running some services regarding customer engagement actually, and we will talk about some analysis regarding new normal. And as we know, actually, in the past months during has the way interact on the daily activities. The change has been very sudden leaving many anxious, confused, and the situation is made worse by the lack of uncertainty regarding the time and method of the crisis. And interesting diagram, actually, if you can see on the screen, from growth of innovations, the metric of impact and severity and duration of the economic. This diagram can show the situation for different industry and its duration regarding related to the pandemic era. And for some industries, this can be a new normal for them. You can see also some picture on the right side, how Wuhan people, businessmen expect to have normal that become normal like before, and they will not face this situation after the pandemic. The new normal is not a new term. This term is widely being used when we face previous crisis in 2008, and currently actually this term is being used to show the situation to the previous normal and welcome to the new normal. And if we're looking at the chart from Prema Katyal, the normal actually is the third phase after the education phase and the solidarity phase. So mostly all around the world actually facing this phase, these three phases. And Indonesia, this is very interesting that the term of new normal is pretty much endorsed officially by the government and following by the media, KOL, key opinion leader, and then common people also posted about this new normal term. So to see the insight regarding this new normal, we crawl over 1 million data by using our platform called Ripple 10. So basically this is a listening tool that developed locally and using NLP methodology to define the positive and negative sentiment. And the all crawl data can be also used to be implemented by other methodology. And today, I will bring to you an example of the implementation of the plastic wheel of emotion to see the emotion of the audiences or consumer. And secondly, I will also bring to you the origin framework to show the personality of customers or consumers talking about the new normal. This is very interesting that the pattern if we're looking at the reach versus mention, the chart is provided by the platform, and if we go to the peak actually of the conversation, the normal trend is basically mostly is being triggered by the announcement of the government. So, for example, for instance, when the government announced the implementation of PSBB, for example, and after that the KOL, some famous people that has higher reach on their account, social media account, being involved in the talk or conversation. Actually, this feature can also be used by brand to see whether the conversation is driven by KOL, media, or probably robot. In terms of timing of posts, consumer who made the new normal certainly has different pattern with usual popular term that we find before. Usually, consumer more active in early morning before they go to work or after they back home. They play with their mobile or gadget. In this case, actually, mainly consumer posted the new normal term between 10 to 12 and 4 to 8 p.m. And usually, if we see day by day, we can find significant differences, while if in the normal condition, we usually find that there are decrement of conversation in weekend. So we presume that working from home impacted the behavioral changing of the consumer in this case. And in terms of positive and negative keywords, consumer pretty much expressing their thought regarding some situation or certain regulation of the government, especially regarding PSBB. Into brand marketing wise, if we benchmark to some global brand, this is new normal situation is being used by them to do some creative action. And we can find easily, mostly they are temporarily change their logo to adapt the new condition. Truly literate to the consumer, while in Indonesia, surprisingly, there's not many brands doing similar things. However, we found some interesting conversation related to the brand campaign. For example, Abnormal, they are smartly use the web of meme produced by the citizen by releasing new normal creative on their social media. While Dettol and KFC also did interesting action that also being talked by the audiences or consumer. And if we go to consumer, talking about the implementation of the plastic wheel of emotion as one of our framework, according to the literation, actually, human can experience about 34,000 of emotion. So plastic framework actually, primarily they have 8 sectors that designed to indicate the 8 primary emotion, which is anger, anticipation, joy, surprise, and disgust. And each primary emotion has its opposite or polar opposites. Joy usually opposite with sadness, fear with opposite with anger, of surprise, and disgust is opposite of trust. And in some cases, actually, if you strategy, you can also combine 2 primary emotion. For example, anticipation and joy combined will be optimism. Joy and trust combined will be love. So this framework can be used for brand to see the emotion of your audiences or consumer regarding your brand. So got 4 dimensions. While the next emotion, the anticipation, we got 22,000 plus mentioned during the, and mostly showing the adoption action of the audiences or consumer related to the pandemic era. And this is sadness, we got 8,000 mentioned. And if we go to the ocean framework, the next framework, this methodology is a very popular framework that being used by the Cambridge Analytica when they helped President Trump actually in winning the last election. This framework will help to analyze the brand and personality toward tone of posting that they are categorized into 6 major with 52 different factors. In the case of Donald Trump, President Trump, Cambridge Analytica divided 50 million conversation of 50 million account on Facebook actually into 26 segmentation, and each segmentation, Donald Trump team try to provide different type of content to convince them to elect President Trump. So in this case, actually, we divided this methodology implemented into each channel. So for Twitter, the audiences of Twitter is more high openness, which means most of the audiences on Twitter who talking about new normal, they are more open to the situation, accept to adapt to the new procedure, while the opposite we can find on YouTube channel. While Instagram is more neuroticism in Instagram, which means netizens feel anxious and they have many concerns regarding the situation, and they try to post to express on their posting. And these are some highlighted posts as example to show each feeling or emotion of each audiences. And that's all. Thank you. I will pass to Bu Marhaiza from Illuminate, who will present more deep insight of customers from different sectors. Thank you, Bu.
Thank you, Pak Elga. So now I'm going to continue with the key insights from social media listening. Sorry about that. Thank you, Pak Elga. And now I'm going to continue with the key insights from social listening. So we have seen from the Ivosights presentation earlier that there are several themes that emerge from the social media data. But for today's presentation, I'm only going to highlight 4 category areas. We look at some insights related to the new normal within the food and beverage. So we're going to look at some insights related to the new normal within the food and beverage, shopping, travel and tourism, and health categories. So what we have done is we use Ivosights program to generate the raw data from social media postings that were published in the past 2 to 3 weeks. On top of that, we also filtered out corporate postings and any public service announcements and focus only on the genuine consumer voices. And of course, the analysis is run based on the keyword new normal. We analyze based on discourse analysis approach, where we look at the language written by the posters, the language used by the posters within the social context. So we don't just look at the sentences or what they write per se, but looking at who are the people posting it and what would be the context of them writing it. So through social listening, we see that Indonesians vary greatly in their reactions towards what they see as the new normal. And based on the broad themes that we investigated, we found a range of emotions expressed by Indonesians, and we were able to group them into 4 segments or 4 typologies. The first typology is what we call the angry rejectors. And these are the people who strongly feel or strongly advocate that people should stay home, as it is still too soon to go back to normal. For them, those who go out are being irresponsible. The second typology is what we call the anxious dilemma. These are people who are going through internal conflicts within themselves. They're going through the internal conflict and dilemma because they actually yearn to experience their previous social life, but yet they are anxious about being exposed to the risk of being infected. Sorry. And there are also some concerns among them that they'll be seen by their peers or their friends as being antisocial because reluctance to go out. The third typology is what we call the cautious optimists. These people are more positive in terms of their attitudes, and they are eager to get back to normality. But at the same time, they are more aware and more cautious in terms of what they do and their practices. So they are very much in control. And but the fourth typology is what we call the excited enthusiasts. Now, these are the people who seem to be throwing cautions to the winds. They actually are very excited about resuming their social activities that were put on hold during the PSBB. And there seemed to be less fear among them. In fact, we could see them posting pictures of them hanging out with their friends without much concerns about social distancing or following the health protocols. So now let's look at the first category that we analyze, which is the food and beverage. We have presented in our previous webinars, for those who've been following us through our webinars, that there is a rise of home cooking and baking trends during the movement restriction periods. Now, interestingly, based on social listening, on using the keyword new normal, the voices tend to be less about home food, but more about having food outside of home. And we see that food and beverage is still very much the medium for social engagement. The excitement for catching up over food and coffee was actually built up during the 3-month social distancing period that limit the social and leisure activities of Indonesians. Because with the closing of many popular cafes for ngopi sessions, Indonesians were deprived of real interaction with other human beings, and it made them crave more for it. As the restrictions are eased recently and the new normal policy being announced, people are excited to finally experience the taste of freedom that they've been yearning for. And what could be more gratifying and more social than catching up with friends over food and coffee? At the other end of the spectrum, we also see a group of people who are concerned about going out too soon, and they want to ensure the right protocols to ensure their safety. And as I mentioned earlier, there is less excitement now about home cooking or baking. What happened is that these activities are no longer a form of escapism for Indonesians. We noticed that there are very few mentions about them in the past 2 weeks when we put in the keyword new normal. Now that people can experience the freedom of going out and hanging out with their friends over food and coffee, being creative with food at home is no longer exciting and no longer a priority for them. And the second category that we analyze is shopping. What we see is that the experience of shopping and going to the malls are now being adopted to accommodate or being adapted to accommodate the health protocols. Yes, shopping malls continue to be the essential elements of urban Indonesian lifestyles, but the reactions in the context of new normal varies. People talk about shopping ambience, which they feel is different now compared to before. While they still look forward to go to the malls, the fact that there are now less people in the malls and there are more health protocols being in place, the whole shopping experience is no longer the same. And in terms of the items that they shop for, based on the postings in the past 2 to 3 weeks, people also seem to be rethinking about their fashion styles and how they dress. For example, face mask now is not just bought for health protection and a symbol of social responsibility. It is also becoming a fashion symbol and used as fashion accessory to match their clothing or their attire or their hijabs. And based on the postings of the past 2 to 3 weeks, we also find less mentions about online shopping. But this is not a surprise to us because as malls start opening up, people now get very excited about visiting the malls and regain their old experience of browsing and window shopping and being in the mall itself. Yet again, at the other end of the spectrum, we see groups of people who advocate for people to continue with online shopping. And we see a lot of words like, just shop online. These are coming from people who actually are very concerned about the spreading of virus, and they feel that it's too soon to open up the shopping malls. The third category that we analyze is the travel and tourism. In the past 2 to 3 weeks, there seemed to be an excitement among Indonesians about visiting local tourist sites. What happened is Indonesians look forward to having a quick escape as soon as the restrictions are eased. First of all, there's still much confusions about new normal for travel because the protocols and the procedures for local travels are still not very clear for most people. However, there is definitely a euphoric sense of freedom related to travel in the new normal. With overseas travel, is still not possible. Indonesians are now focusing on the local travel experience. The months of being quarantined at home has actually built up a strong, very stressful situation for most of them. Some described it as being jailed at home. So the new normal actually brings excitement as people are very eager to escape their jails and savor their newfound freedom through the travel experience. And again, at the end of the spectrum, we have people who are very concerned. There are consumers who feel that opening the leisure sector should be the last action by the government, as they still feel that there is no proper health safety protocols in place. So they're very concerned about the safety compliance in this case. Now, the fourth and the last category that we analyze is health. And this is the most important topic being talked about on social media. Health is now seen as the collective responsibility at societal level. It is not just about personal health, but also about general health and well-being of the society. But we see the level of adherence to the health protocols vary among Indonesians. First of all, many Indonesians still, they're still in dilemma about the relaxing of social restrictions. They still want to support the local economy, but at the same time, they're worried about the compliance of health protocols among Indonesians. It is also interesting that from our analysis on new normal, people are using visible cues such as mask and social distancing as a measure of how socially responsible people are. So mask now is becoming a symbol of social responsibility. Cycling is also another visible cues that people use to discuss social responsibility. As we've seen, the re-emergence of bicycling among Indonesians. But there are also dilemmas where people, while wanting to support the economy, there are people who are very concerned about the lack of social distancing and the spreading of virus. So they're very concerned when some offices start opening up and people start going out. So as conclusion, as we enter the post-PSBB, we get a strong sense of euphoric emotions. The euphoria actually comes from the desire to make up for lost time and the desire to enjoy everything that they have missed during the movement restrictions. Now, some of you may be familiar with the work of Professor Mark Ritson. He's a very well-known marketer. What he's done is he looks at the global pandemic through a stage of three-step model. And Indonesia now is in the false pneuma stage. False pneuma is a short period of elation where everyone talks about how much the world has changed because of the pandemic. And of course, we've gone through the COVID crisis, which is the first stage. The second stage is the false pneuma, which is what we're going through now. But this is only temporary and is going to be, according to Professor Mark Ritson, this is going to be short-lived. And what people should watch out for is the next stage, which is called the exogenous recession. According to Professor Mark Ritson, what followed next, this recession period is the stage where most brands and marketers should watch out for, because habits may change during this period. So learning from the insights of our analysis based on the new normal, there are three broad key action points that brands need to look into. The first one is about understanding the undercurrent consumer sentiments. So brands need to keep on listening, keep on researching, keep tracking and detect any shifts in the behavior among consumers. Second key action points is about communication. At the moment, the sentiments are quite polarizing. So brands need to be careful in terms of the messaging that they craft and communicate to the consumers. And the third stage, which is the most important action point, is to prepare for the recession stage. So what brands need to look into is actually to start learning from the past recessions, but at the same time, look into the 4 Ps, because what Professor Mark Ritson also talks about is, to address every element of the 4 Ps. Right now, people are focusing too much about products, about pushing their products and communicating about their products during the COVID-19 crisis. But what brands should watch out for is to look at all areas of the 4 Ps and start planning and tweaking messaging in these areas. So that's about it from us at Illuminate and also from Ivosights. Now I hand over to Dawn.
Okay, thank you, Isa, for the presentation, and thank you also, Pak Elga, for the presentation. I think very insightful and very interesting from both of our speakers today. I would like to open the session now for question and answer. So please, again, if you can just send me a chat in the chat function of Zoom with your questions. We already have a couple of questions ready to go, so we'll start with those while everybody's thinking of their additional questions. So the first question is, while the trend of cooking and baking at home is reducing, since it's no longer the stage to share digitally, do you think in the near future the trend of cooking and baking will increase again? Do you think the cooking and baking at home will be a continuous new normal in the future? So who would like to take that question? Perhaps Isa?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one first. We feel that, you know, it depends on who you communicate to. We feel that the trend will continue. Whatever that people are going through right now, you know, it will continue. It's just that, as I mentioned earlier, people now are in the euphoric stage. It's the new normal and newer stage. So it's temporary period, but eventually people will, because people already experience what they can do, you know, at home. So yeah, we feel it will continue, although not as much as before during the period where most people are at home. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Okay, just one other additional question on that regard was, is there a new trend around meal kit kind of food preparation in the new normal era that we see? I'm take that one or...
Yeah, I'm not sure we see that from our analysis. It didn't come out, at least from the data that we analyzed, because, you know, bear in mind that we actually analyze postings from the past 2 to 3 weeks, and the keyword that we use is new normal. So it may not come out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an interesting question, actually, to see what will happen in the next few weeks. Because as Isa presented, it's very much a time for this elation and this euphoria. So thank you. I have another question. This one is directed at Pak Elga. How can we detect emotions such as anger, joy, sadness, and so on via social listening? Pak Elga?
So, yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, we have implemented some methodology. So basically, we can detect actually the emotion in this case actually referring to the keyword-based emotion. So we can implementing AI or NLP analytics or some other methodology to differentiate actually the emotion among consumers. So basically, for some similar tools like listening tools, we implement keyword-based analytics. So this will be more into keyword or symbol that being used by the audiences. Hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pak Elga. I have another question coming in. Since small F&B home businesses are emerging during the lockdown as a response to declining economy with strong activation on social media, how do you see this business sustaining during the new normal? So this is kind of the F&B home-based businesses. Do we have any indication of that from the data?
Maybe Pak Elga can answer that, because I think from our analysis, yeah, it didn't come out about the home business. Yeah, mention some of that.
So actually, we find some conversations regarding this F&B business, and most of the F&B business now move to some selling methodology, especially WhatsApp selling, for example. So WhatsApp selling now widely being used by the F&B business to sell their product to customers. So this methodology probably will be long lasting in this period of pandemic. And this will be also opportunity for some people who can adopt this methodology to sell their product. Another thing, we also see that some FMB industry players, actually, they also move the channels. They try to extend the selling channels. For example, some restaurant that we recognize on the data, they move from dine-in mostly. They try to sell their product in packaging by using Instagram channel or Facebook channel or WhatsApp channel. So there's some different behavior, different strategy being implemented by the FMB business for Noble. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. It's very interesting to see how businesses are adapting during this phase. Thank you, Pak. Okay, the next question is, if we want to create marketing content for digital marketing activities, what kind of message that will be well delivered? What kind of sentiment that consumers expect from the brand, such as the brand that is caring, empathetic, or what?
I think we've seen from our previous webinars as well, we presented quite a bit about this in terms of the messaging. It's very important for brands to be empathetic, appear to be understanding about the consumer situation. So I think that's the narratives and the voice that the consumer want to hear. Maybe Pak Elga wants to add on to this.
Yeah, I mean, Indonesian people is very sensitive. So empathy is one of the important keyword for brand to define their communication strategy, especially in this situation. Yeah. And to be honest, actually, when we find some conversation on our data, the indication of political intention is still there. So this also can be something that have to be concerned by brand. So they have to be very carefully in terms of empathy, the situation of the consumer, and also tend to be neutral instead of go to support the government policy or government regulation. So brands have to be very careful in this situation. Especially, they have to be more increase their empathy to the situation, listen more to the customers or consumers. Thank you, Lu.
Yeah, if I may add on, because you mentioned something about being neutral. So I think neutrality is also another important element that brands need to ensure. Because as we've seen from Pak Elga's presentation earlier, there seems to be a lot of anger still among the consumers. And there's also, different other negative emotions in the sentiments. So what we've seen is that the sentiments are very polarizing, still neutral, and not appear to be, siding on any side.
Okay, thank you. We have another couple of questions, if I may. The first one is, may I know generally what is the pros and cons of social media listening tool?
I believe that's that would be best answered by Pak Elga.
So can you repeat the question, please? My internet is not.
Sure. The question was, may I know generally what is the pros and cons of social media listening tool?
Okay. So this type of platform usually pricing is based on projects, student project. So maybe we can discuss after actually to show you the figure.
Okay.
I think for us, from qualitative perspective, social listening tool is quite useful for us because when we combine with in-depth analysis, we can actually detect and look at patterns and what are the sentiments from there and dig deeper into it. So we find that really useful in a way to understand further, what are the voices of the consumers and dig further into it.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And obviously, afterwards to speak in further detail that we're using, of course. Question here is, the cycling is booming now. Do you think it will last long? Approximately how long will it last? So the trend of bicycling or cycling. Any thoughts from the speakers?
Would you like to take this on? Otherwise, well, it's a very interesting question. We've already started seeing, the growth of, cycling trend in Indonesia even before the COVID-19. But I think now that, people are going through the post-PSBB, it's coming back, and people started seeing more and more people cycling. It's really difficult to predict, but we feel that, with the growing awareness about health, people are becoming more health conscious, perhaps it would stay on, but it's really, nobody can tell, yeah, unless you do a proper quantitative survey, for example, yeah. But we feel that, with the growing awareness about health, leading a very good lifestyle, it may stay on among Indonesians. What do you think, Pa Elga? Any thoughts?
Interesting question. So actually, we found some very interesting conversation regarding the cycling book on our data. So Indonesia is very, very unique. Some people actually go to cycling because they have to be accepted by a certain community.
Trendy.
So cycling only related to the health or something, but they are more into community-based reason. So probably in the future, this will be still exist, and then and some sentiments from last case, if you heard, actually some one community actually they brought the bicycle inside the restaurant, and this turned to very negative response from the netizen. So this community actually using certain high-class brand of bicycle actually, and they bring the cycle inside the restaurant, and then some people post the situation, and then many netizens give very negative response regarding this. So I mean, Indonesia is very unique, and this type of activity usually connected to community. They want to be involved in some community. This is one of the activity that we with friends. And in this case, actually, after PSBB is open, so the community activity is not increase, and then this probably will be lasting for some time still.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think for both of our speakers have talked about, in some extent, about some of the trends that were happening before COVID started, and how that might continue given, especially given the circumstances we have now. I have another question. About the trend in F&B business during this new normal phase, especially RTD with immune booster claim like vitamin C, or jamu herbal drink like red ginger, turmeric, etc. And the
Mm-hmm.
So when it's being popular early, starting in February, and then we find some indication of increment of keyword jamu, for example,
Yeah.
being taught by the authorities. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I think Pak Elga has frozen a little bit there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Helga. I'm going to move on to the next question. As new normal is starting, a lot of people want to break free from the lockdown situation. Does this behavior apply also to the buying behavior trend, i.e. consumer trends to splurge as a self-reward for staying at home, regardless of the unstable economy? So do we see a splurge in spending now that people are allowed to be out and about a bit more, even though it may be an unstable economy situation for the country?
Yeah, I believe we see a bit of that from the analysis, but over and above that, I think we've been seeing quite a lot of that, right? People are splurging and spending during this period. And now that people can go to the malls again, we feel that, you know, the splurging is happening and will happen for a while until people realize that we are entering recession soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it relates back to that elation period, the euphoria
Yes.
period
Yeah.
that we're talking about. And actually, if I can just jump in here, if we look at other countries, some other countries that have gone through this social restriction easing earlier on, countries like maybe Malaysia or New Zealand, those sorts of countries, we see actually that has also been the trend there as well, that at least initially it's been a lot of splurge spending, and then it perhaps eases down once some of the economic factors come in. Okay. Another question, may I know whether the price conscious still becomes a priority amongst middle and low income during pandemic? So I think that relates to the last question, actually. Isa, do you want to take that? Or Pak Elga, do you want to answer on that one about the price consciousness? Is it a priority amongst middle and low income?
Okay. No, yeah, I think people are not, at least temporarily, for the time being, people are not really looking into pricing because people keep on spending and, you know, buying stuff. The splurging is there, but we didn't see any specific mentions on price, like people mentioning about price from this specific analysis on new normal. Do you find any, Elga? Not sure whether. Hello? No, maybe Pak Elga can't hear us.
Yeah, I think there's an issue with his with the sound there.
Yeah.
If there's any other questions, then please do send them through. I have just one other one here. We know that online shopping's been very popular during the social restriction stage. Do we expect this to be continuing as a popular channel moving forwards?
I think online shopping has always been very popular among Indonesians, and people do shop a lot more during the you know, the pandemic because they are at home and, you know, they need to get some excitement to create some excitement. But we feel that this will continue, although we did not see from our analysis because our keyword was new normal. And when it comes to new normal, people are focusing more on you know, what's waiting for them ahead. So they're not focusing, they're not talking about what they are practicing already. You know, they're already practicing at home. So they're focusing more. That's the discussion that we've seen from the data that you know, we get from the social listening. But that does not mean that new normal. That does not mean that online shopping will die off, because I think we've seen from other research in other countries, and you know, experts have been talking about this, about the trends of online shopping. We feel that it will stay on. Marketers have predicted that online shopping will stay on and in fact become bigger. In fact, in Malaysia, government is putting so much emphasis on you know, investment in online platforms, you know, to encourage people to shop more online these days. So yes, now people have started going to the malls, but malls will be there, but online shopping will remain, and in fact may become a bigger trend among consumers.
Okay, thank you, Isa. Are there any final questions? I don't see any coming in. So therefore, I think thank you very much for today's session. Thank you very much to our two speakers, Pak Elga and Bu Isa. I think it's been a very insightful session today. And as I mentioned, we will be sending through the presentations and also the recordings of today's session. So thank you very much, and please keep an ear out for the next invite, the next webinar within our series. We'll be sending you soon. Thank you. Hope you can join next time as well.
Thank you.
Dawn.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Bu Isa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.